Mama, why are you looking at me like that?
Emeka, my son, you've returned.
I need answers.
Where is my father's grave?
You came back. Hey.
Where is my father's grave?
We buried him 3 days ago. It was...
I sent money for 12 years.
12
Years.
The house was never finished. Papa died without a bed he could call his own. But the money left London every single month.
There were expenses. You don't understand how things work here.
Then explain it to me.
I managed everything. I sacrificed.
The night Emeka's phone rang at 11:47 p.m., something inside him already knew. Not in the way people describe premonitions in books, not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet weight that settled in his chest the moment the screen lit up and he saw the words Nigeria calling glowing in the dark of his London flat like a warning he could not read fast enough. He had been sitting at the edge of his bed, still in his work clothes, too tired to undress, too awake to sleep. London had that effect on him. The city never truly went dark. Through his window, street lights burned orange against the night sky, and somewhere below, a car engine growled and faded into silence. Everything here was organized, predictable, cold in the way that had nothing to do with temperature. He stared at the phone for 3 full seconds before he picked it. Hello? Silence. Then a breath, shaky, thin, like someone who had been crying so long they no longer had the strength to cry properly. Emeka, it was Obinna, his younger brother, but the voice did not sound like Obinna. It sounded like a man twice his age, like something had reached inside him and removed whatever was keeping him upright. What is it? Emeka sat up immediately. His body moved before his mind caught up. Another silence. Longer this time. Then the words came. Papa don't die. 4 words. Simple. Ordinary words, each one individually meaningless. But together, in that order, at that hour, in that voice, they became something that had no name. Something that did not enter through the ears. Something that entered through the center of the chest and expanded slowly until there was no room left for air. Emeka's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. He did not move to pick it up. He just sat there, staring at the wall opposite his bed. The white wall, the blank, empty London wall that had no memory, no history, nothing that could hold him in this moment. No, he whispered. To the wall. To the blank, empty London wall. Room to the air. No. He picked up the phone with a hand that no longer felt like his own. Obinna was still crying on the other end. He just fall inside compound, Emeka. They carry him go clinic, but his voice broke completely. But he was already gone before they reach. Emeka stood up so fast, his chair scraped back and hit the wardrobe behind him. He did not notice. When? He asked. His voice was someone else's voice, calm in the way that means nothing is functioning properly. This evening, around 6 o'clock Nigerian time, while Emeka was on the underground, packed between strangers, staring at his reflection in a dark window, his father had been falling in a compound 5,000 miles away. He stood in his London flat and felt the distance between them, not in kilometers, but in something that had no measurement, something Irreversible. I'm coming, he said. It was the only thing left to say. The flight from London to Lagos felt nothing like the ones before it. Every previous journey home had carried excitement, the anticipation of familiar smells, pepper soup, red earth after rain, his mother's voice through the gate before he even knocked, his father's deliberate, unhurried footsteps crossing the compound to meet him, never running, always walking, as if dignity was something a man carried in the pace of his movement. This time, there was nothing like that. Emeka stood in his window seat with his eyes open and saw none of the clouds passing below him. He saw his father instead, every version of him across every year. The man who woke him up before dawn for farm work and never apologized for the cold. The man who sat under the mango tree every evening, carving small things from wood, animals, figures, shapes with no name, not for selling, just for the peace of making something with his hands. The man who sold his prize goods, the one he had raised from a kid, the one he refused to sell for 3 consecutive Christmases, and used the money to sort Emeka's admission fees without telling him until years later. The man who stood at the bus park the morning Emeka left for Lagos to begin the journey that would eventually take him to London, and said only 4 words: "Go, make us proud." No embrace, no tears, just those 4 words, and a hand briefly on Emeka's shoulder, firm and certain, like a transfer of something sacred. That man was gone. Emeka pressed his forehead against the cold aircraft window and held himself together by force. At Murtala Mohammed Airport, Lagos heat received him like a verdict. He moved through the crowd with his bag on his back and his eyes focused on nothing. From Lagos to Onitsha by road, from Onitsha to the village by a smaller vehicle that filled the last part of the journey with red dust and the sound of engine strain. He watched the road narrow, asphalt becoming dirt, electricity poles becoming fewer, the noise of the city falling away behind him. Home was getting closer, but something inside Emeka felt further away. When the vehicle turned into the village road, he saw the compound from a distance. Black cloth on the gate, plastic chairs arranged in uneven rows outside. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices. He stepped out of the vehicle, and no one rushed to greet him the way they used to. People noticed him and looked away quickly. Side conversations dropped into whispers. Eyes moved toward him and then moved past him too fast. Something was wrong. Not the grief. Grief he expected. He had prepared himself for crying, for wailing, for the loud, painful expression of loss that his people did not hide or reduce. But this was different. This was the quiet of people who knew something they were not sure how to say. Before he reached the gate, his cousin Emmanuel appeared beside him and held his arm. Emeka. "Leave me, Emmanuel. Let me go and see." Emeka. His cousin's grip tightened. "There is something you must hear before you enter that compound." He stopped, looked at his cousin's face. Emmanuel was not a dramatic man. He did not create scenes. He did not speak unless the weight of a thing demanded it. "What kind of thing?" Emeka asked. Emmanuel looked around, then lowered his voice. "Papa did not die from sickness." The air changed. "What are you saying to me?" "And I am saying that your father was helped to die." Emeka stared at him for a long time. Then he turned and walked into the compound. Inside, the gathering parted slowly as he moved through it. He reached the casket, stood before it, looked at the face of the man who had made him, Chukwuemeka Okonkwo Sr., lying in a borrowed suit, hands folded, eyes closed, face arranged into a peace he may never have felt in his final hours. Emeka stood there without moving for a long time. Then he turned around. "Who?" he asked, quietly. "To the compound. To everyone. To no one." Silence. He asked again, "Who?" And then the voices began. Not answers, arguments. People speaking over each other, defending themselves before they had been accused, pointing fingers before fingers were pointed at them. The compound erupted in the particular chaos of people who had been holding a secret too long and could no longer manage its weight. Emeka stood in the middle of it and watched. For 12 years, he had sent money from London, every month, without fail, through thick financial seasons and thin ones, through overtime shifts and nights when his own account was close to empty. He sent because his father was there, because the house needed finishing, because family meant obligation, and obligation meant showing up even from a distance. He sent because he trusted. He had sent through Auntie Emeka. She was the one who had said early in the years, "Leave it with me, Emeka. I will manage everything from this end. You focus on your work. We will handle what is here." She seemed like the logical choice. She was organized. She kept records. She spoke with authority at family meetings. She was the kind of woman who made you feel like things were being handled properly. He believed her for 12 years. He looked at her now across the compound. She was sitting on the wooden bench, near the door of the main house, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes carefully positioned toward the ground. She was the only person in the compound who had not stood up when his voice rose, the only one who had not joined the argument, the only one who was sitting completely still. That stillness told him everything. He walked toward her. The compound went quiet as he moved. He stopped directly in front of her and stood there until she had no choice but to look up. "Auntie Emeka." She met his eyes. Briefly. "I don't know what people are telling you. You know how this family is. Anytime something happens, they look for someone to blame." "Where is the house?" Emeka said. She paused. "The house I have been sending money to build for 12 years. Where is it?" She opened her mouth. "Don't tell me about expenses. Don't tell me about costs. Don't tell me about how difficult things are here. I know how difficult things are here. That is why I sent money every single month for 12 years. His voice did not rise. It fell, lower and lower, until it was barely above a whisper. "Where is my father's house?" Auntie Emeka looked away. Emeka turned. He looked at Obina, who had appeared in the doorway of the main house and was standing there watching with the expression of a man who had known the truth for a long time and had not known what to do with it. "Obina," Emeka said, "how long have you known?" Obina looked at the ground. "How long?" 2 years, Obina whispered. "I found out 2 years ago. She told me if I talked, she would deny everything and the family would not believe me against her. I didn't know what to do. I was going to tell you when you came home, but..." His voice collapsed. "Papa died before I could tell you." Emeka stood between his brother and his aunt and felt the full weight of what had been done. Not just to the money, to his father. A man who spent his final years believing his son in London had abandoned the building of his house, who sat under his mango tree watching his compound stay unfinished year after year, perhaps wondering why the son who went to make them proud had forgotten them, perhaps dying with that quiet confusion inside him, perhaps never knowing that every month across an ocean his firstborn son had been faithful without fail, never knowing the faithfulness was being eaten before it could reach him. Emeka sat down heavily on the nearest chair. He put his face in his hands. He stayed that way for a long time. The burial was 3 days later. Red earth, open sky, the sound of a pastor's voice moving across the compound and out into the surrounding bush. Women in black, children standing at the edges, not fully understanding. Old men who had known Chukwuemeka Sr. for decades, standing with their caps in their hands, faces holding that particular expression of men who know their own time is not far. Emeka stood at the graveside and did not cry during the ceremony, not because he had no tears, but because grief of this size does not always come out in the expected moment. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it finds a quieter hour when no one is watching, when the performance of mourning is over and only the truth remains. After the last prayer, after the last voice faded, after the compound slowly emptied of borrowed plastic chairs and folded black cloth and visitors who needed to return to their own lives and their own homes, Emeka remained. He walked slowly to the mango tree at the edge of the compound, his father's tree. The bark was the same, the shade was the same, even the slight lean of the trunk away from the direction of the prevailing wind was the same as it had always been. He sat beneath it the way his father used to sit, back against the trunk, legs stretched forward, hands resting open on his knees. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to feel everything he had been holding together by force since the night the phone rang. Grief came first, the kind that does not announce itself. It arrived from somewhere below the chest, rose slowly, and broke over him quietly. He did not fight it. He sat under his father's tree and allowed 12 years of love that never arrived
move through him and out of him. Then the anger came. Not loud, not violent, but clean and certain and cold as deep water. 12 years. 12 years of extra shifts. 12 years of eating cheap to send more. 12 years of explaining to himself why London still did not feel like home, because home was somewhere he was building, somewhere he was maintaining, somewhere his father was waiting for the house to be finished. 12 years of a woman sitting inside that trust and feeding herself while his father sat under this tree, waiting, not knowing. Emeka opened his eyes and looked at the unfinished back wall of the compound where the new house was supposed to stand. The foundation was there, 12 years old, overgrown at the edges, concrete poured and abandoned like a promise that had been made and then quietly forgotten by someone who had no intention of keeping it. He looked at it for a long time. Then he made his decision. He did not go to the police immediately. He went first to a lawyer, a quiet, thorough man in Onitsha who was known for handling family property disputes without noise and without mercy. He brought 12 years of bank transfer records. He brought his own documentation. He brought Obina, who was now willing to speak, whose guilt of his 2 years of silence had transformed into something resolute and clear. Auntie Nneka did not see it coming. People like her rarely do. They grow comfortable inside the trust they have stolen. They begin to believe that comfort is permanent, that the person far away will stay far away, that distance equals powerlessness. She did not understand that distance had only been geography. The legal process took months, but it moved. Every month it moved a little further. Records were examined, accounts were traced, the amount that had been diverted across 12 years was documented precisely and without emotion by a man who treated numbers the way surgeons treat wounds, carefully, completely, without flinching. Auntie Nneka's position in the family shifted the moment the truth became official. The woman who managed everything, who spoke with authority at every meeting, who made people feel like she was carrying burdens others could not handle, that woman disappeared. In her place was someone older and smaller, sitting in a room that felt nothing like it used to, surrounded by people who now looked at her differently. There is a particular suffering that comes from being seen accurately after years of being seen wrongly. It is worse than any punishment a court can deliver. It is the loss of the version of yourself you constructed carefully over years. Once that version is gone, nothing replaces it. She felt every inch of it. She came to Emeka 3 months after the legal process began, came to the compound on a Tuesday morning.
Unannounced, without the authority she used to carry in her posture. She sat across from him at the table in the main house and said she wanted to explain. He listened, Not because he needed the explanation. He already had everything he needed. He listened because his father had been a man who believed that every person deserved to be heard, that listening was not agreement, that receiving someone's truth fully was a form of dignity, both for the one speaking and the one receiving. When she finished, he was quiet for a while. Then he said, "The legal process will continue. What you give back will not be everything. You know that, I know that. Some of what was taken cannot be returned." He paused. "But my father did not raise me for revenge. He raised me for restoration. So I am going to finish his house. And every time I look at it, I will know that it stands because I refuse to let what you did be the final word." He stood up. "You can leave now." She left, and the weight that left with her was not small. The house was completed 14 months after the burial. Not the way Emeka had originally designed it in his head during those London nights when building something for his father had kept him going through difficult seasons. Simpler than that. Cleaner. More honest. The kind of house a man like his father would have actually wanted. Not grand, not showy, but solid. Built to last. Built to mean something. On the day it was finished, Emeka stood in front of it alone. The compound was quiet. Evening light came in low and warm across the red earth, the way it always did in this place, the way it had done since before Emeka was born. He stood there for a long time. Then he walked to the mango tree, sat down beneath it, and spoke to his father the way people speak to the ones they love when there is no longer any other way to reach them. "I finished it, Papa." Wind moved through the upper branches. It took longer than it should have, and not for the reasons you probably thought. He paused. "I want you to know, every month I was there. I never stopped. What reached you was not everything that was sent, but everything was sent." He looked at the house. "This is the proof." He stayed under the tree until the evening light faded, and the compound filled with the sounds of night. Insects, distant voices, wind through the bush, the ordinary sounds of a village settling into darkness. Then he stood, straightened himself, and whispered the final thing. "Rest. Everything they interrupted, I finished it." Was Emeka wrong to handle this through law instead of confronting the family directly? Or was walking away from revenge the strongest thing he could have done? Drop in your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.